welcome, Pip. Apologies for the problems that we've had with technology this morning. I know things have not gone to plan. If it's any comfort, I've just spent the last hour presenting to the screen by myself. So I'm going to keep it relatively straightforward for this one. Hopefully other people will have the link and we'll be able to access it this time. I'm going to record again, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow people to kind of access their own cameras and mics rather than kind of risking faffing with any options that might, again, break whatever the system is. So apologies for this is an hour later start.
Don't worry, we were having a little chat in the other room, just saying we couldn't hear anything and what was going on. So I posted the link, so hopefully a few people will come and join. But I know we lost a few people while we were waiting, so we'll see.
No worries. I'll start just admitting people as we go. After my camera finally stops working, and as we go through, I'll reiterate my apologies for whatever technical disaster that we've had this morning. As I just said to Pip, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave everybody's mics and cameras on. I'm not going to faff with any options just in case we break it. Well, I break it again. So apologies, we've got a slightly later start. An hour later start. As I said, I've presented this once now over the last hour and recorded it. So potentially it should be a smoother run through is what I'm hoping on the second time round. Roughly in terms of some of the things that I'm going to go through, that'll probably last around 45 minutes, maybe a little bit more or less. But what the hope is that we'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. As I said, I'm going to leave everybody's mics and cameras on, so feel free to raise your hand, stop me at any point. As I said, I've put the recording on for this one, but as this is aimed at kind of a bit more of an informal discussion rather than kind of like a key briefing event. We may not upload this one afterwards if it's not necessary. But it's probably worth me kind of just, probably worth me introducing myself first. So good morning. Again, apologies for the later start than planned. Hopefully we will have a few more people joining us. I think there's 30 people registered for this event, so hopefully more people will be able to jump on the call, noting that we've had issues with links and access this morning, so apologies for that. So my name is Kate Williams. I work with the SBRI Centre of Excellence as a project manager. Our reasons for holding this second briefing event is that we just wanted the opportunity for those who are possibly less familiar with the SBRI process, less familiar with the application process that we use for these challenges, to just provide an opportunity to kind of run through the application process, give a bit of an overview of how we assess those applications, and just allow you the opportunity to ask some more questions a bit more informally. So we do note that in terms of SBRI delivery, in the past, it's primarily been more focused, admittedly, at private sector organisations, but we're really keen to encourage other organisations to participate, recognising the key role that they play in innovation and in delivering better services within our communities. So that's kind of why we're holding today's second event. What I'm not going to go through today is kind of the finer details of what SBRI is, what the centre is, or anything like that in terms of the Welsh Innovation Strategy. That's all in the first briefing. That's all recorded and available on Simply Do. So I'm not going to kind of bore you by going through all those details today. You can access that at a later date. As I said, I'm just going to probably helps if I kind of share my screen. And I'll go through just some of the bits. So previously I was going to leave people's cameras and microphones off, but as I said, being as we've already had some technical issues this morning, I'm not going to risk having any more, that's for certain. So I'm going to leave everybody's cameras and mics on. I haven't enabled Q&A in this one, so if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. And what we'll try and do is just collate those at the end and excuse me, hopefully kind of be able to address those at the end of this session. If there are any that I can't answer, as I said, it's just myself providing a bit more of an informal chat today. If there's any that I can't answer, I will take away, and then we'll aim to get the answers for those up on the Simply Do website after this event. As I said, hopefully we'll have a few more people joining us as we go. If I can ask you to turn your mics off, just so we don't kind of have background noises, that would be great. But as I said, I'm not going to do that as a standard, just to make sure we don't risk any more technical disasters this morning. So in terms of the agenda for today, I'm just, as I said, going to give you a bit of a recap of what the challenge is, and what we're looking to support through that challenge. Whilst we covered the Simply Do portal in the previous briefing event, I'm going to just give you another key brief look at that, just so you're familiar with what it looks like, familiar with the different tabs that we've got underneath that, which one provides the right information, which one you should be going to submit your application, things like that. So I'll just give a brief overview during that second point. Now, points 3 and 4, I kind of cover together. So what I'm going to do is just on the Simply Do platform, I'm going to take you through the application process, some of the questions that we have within that. And at the same time, I'm going to give you a bit of a brief overview of what some of the assessment criteria are that we're going to be looking at in relation to each of those questions. So I'm going to kind of handle those two together. And then hopefully at the end of that, we'll just be able to have a bit more of an informal discussion, a bit more some Q&As, just to kind of cover off any concerns people have, any questions they have, and hopefully we can kind of cover that all at the end. As I said, if you want to kind of put anything in the chat, so we can capture any questions as we go along, please feel free to do that. But I'll try and kind of keep them to the end if that's all right. So to start off with, what is the challenge that we're looking at? So the challenge opportunity that we've launched recently is to seek to identify and support the delivery of collaborative projects that can demonstrate the potential and scalability of near market solutions and/or previously researched models of care. So this is really aiming to build on, say, previous feasibility work, previous things that people have started to explore and understood the benefits of, and to provide that stepping stone in order to be able to develop that core evidence and potentially case studies that can inform future business cases and ideally wider rollout if those solutions provide the benefits that they aim to. Go to the next slide. So what are we looking to support? So we're looking to support new models of service and or complementary solutions and technologies that can further support the sustainability of care. And there's a real focus here on prevention and person-centred care. So it says new models of care, but I should say new models of care and technology must be co-designed and co-developed with the people who are going to use those. So whether or not that's the actual service provider or whether or not that's the care recipient receiving domiciliary care services. And underpinning all that is making sure that we're designing in a way that fits with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act. You'll note there's a secondary, I suppose there's a complementary theme that sits underneath that, which we've called supporting the foundations. So basically that's looking at the other barriers, the other issues that are kind of underpinning some of the wider domiciliary care delivery and potentially seeking solutions that might kind of provide a bit more focus on those. So they're the things that we can't ignore. They are underlying barriers and issues that potentially need to be addressed for any solution, whether or not that's technology or a service to be implemented in the future. So there's things around skills growth, connectivity, recruitment and retention, which we're aware is a big issue. So there's things within there that kind of, it's a bit more of a broader context, I suppose, that might be complementary to the overall delivery of domiciliary care. So the key thing you'll note at the top of the page is that we are not looking to support feasibility studies. So these are not desktop studies. What we're looking for is real on-the-ground testing with the potential end users to demonstrate and to gather that evidence and data. So what we're aiming to support are R&D contracts to deliver either a phase 2, which is that prototyping and demonstrating. So kind of that next phase from the feasibility work you might have already undertaken. Or potentially, if you've already done some of that demonstrating and prototyping on the ground, then we're looking potentially to support phase 3, which we call scale and spread. So basically what that's looking at is how can you test your solution on a wider scale, potentially with different demographics, different areas within Wales, potentially different stakeholders as well, to test whether or not these early benefits you might have identified in your previous prototyping or demonstrating work, if we deliver this on a wider scale with different partners, different collaborators, can this demonstrate the same benefit? So it's really proving that validity across Wales, which is what we're ideally looking for, is solutions that can be delivered across Wales to making sure we're really gaining that scale and impact that we hope for. So in terms of what current funding is available, at the moment we have £1 million available to support this challenge. So ideally, we're looking to support up to 5 projects. So that gives you a rough budget of, say, up to 200,000 per project. We do reserve the right as a funder to potentially adjust some of those figures depending on the budget availability. So some of the things we might consider, is a scale of and quality of a project sufficient that it might require a larger budget. So for example, if it's working with a large range of stakeholders and potentially delivering on a wider area across Wales, we might consider additional budget. And potentially we're always looking for additional funders as well. So potentially if we are able to secure additional funding, that may enable us to support more projects. But at the moment, it's 1 million to support up to 5 projects. The key thing to note with this challenge, which is a little bit different to how we've delivered things in the past, is that the project costs can be claimed for the innovative solution provider and for staffing resource requirements for the future end customer. So whether or not that's a local authority, health or third sector collaborator that is working with that lead applicant to deliver their funded project. So within the breakdown of the costs, we'll be looking for you to kind of state, what amount of funding will go to each participant within that project, to each collaborator is what we've called them in this instance. So what are some of the key aspects of this challenge? So the key thing for this is that it must be collaborative in nature. That's why we've kind of set out in the challenge brief that you must work with that future end customer. And that just doesn't mean engaged and keeping people aware. That means actually involving different organisations as you develop that solution. So engaging people right from the start of your delivery. So we're really looking for things that are co-delivered, co-created and co-designed. We can't get away from the budget restraints that we're facing, so sustainability and affordability will be significant aspects of this challenge. We're looking for things that can scale up, that can be implemented across Wales. So as part of the project delivery, what we'll be looking for at the end is that there will be a full evaluation, and this will be including benefits analysis and an economics analysis. So again, on the last point, solutions must demonstrate that their inclusive approach. Obviously, there is a digital aspect of this challenge. What we're hoping is that, the digital divide won't be increased by any technology or solution that's implemented. So you'll need to consider what additional needs and barriers might prevent end users from accessing your technology or service, whether or not that's language requirements. Obviously, hopefully it goes without saying that Welsh language standards will be a consideration. So can your solution or service be accessed in Welsh? But also, are there other language requirements that might be required? Are there other additional barriers in terms of affordability for solutions that you'll need to consider to make sure as many people as possible are able to access your service or technology should it be brought to market at the end of this challenge? So a quick reiteration of the key dates. As I said, little asterisks at the bottom, these dates may be subject to change, but these are the timescales that we're currently working towards, and we aim to stick to those as much as possible. So the closing date for this challenge is 20th of October at 12 p.m. So as I've said in the first briefing event, please don't leave it till 10 to 12 on the Friday of the 20th to submit your application. If you have any issues with submitting that application, we won't be able to help you if it's past that 12 p.m. deadline. So please make sure you look at that earlier on, so that if you do have any issues, you can either contact us or contact Simply Do support directly, just to make sure that we can address any issues by that 12 p.m. deadline. As I said, if it goes past that, I'm afraid there's very little we can do to support that. We have to make sure that this is a fair and open process, and that includes sticking to the deadlines. So once we've had the closing date on the 20th of October, the plan is to commence assessment and scoring of those applications in the following week, with the aim to shortlist by the end of that week and notify potential applicants that they've been shortlisted and that they will be invited to a meet and greet. So the current aim is that a meet and greet session will be taking place on the 6th of November. So please do earmark that date in your diary. If you are successful in being shortlisted, you'll be sent an invitation for that day. And basically that meet and greet, what it's about is just an opportunity to present to assessors and project board members so that they can ask some further questions for clarification. You can provide a little bit more additional context about your challenge, and we can just allow for any kind of areas that aren't quite clear to be clarified within that meet and greet. So we'll ask you to provide a very short presentation, and then there'll be opportunity for questions and answers after that. Once that's been completed, we're hoping that a quick decision will be made and that we'll be releasing that decision by the end of 8th of November, with the intention to award contracts quickly after that. So you'll note that within the Simply Do platform, there's an example SBRI contract. So to be clear, across the whole of UK for SBRI delivery, there's a standard contract that we use. That's not subject to change. We don't use a different one in Wales, so the best of the UK. It is a standard contract. So please do make sure that you make yourself familiar with the terms and conditions included in that contract. Because if you are successful in being awarded an R&D contract, then this is what you'll be signing. We won't be negotiating those terms after that date. So please make sure you read it through, you're familiar with it, and you're happy with what you're signing. So ideally, the projects will commence 20th of November. We're allowing up to 12 months for project to delivery. So aiming to complete by the 29th of November, and then allowing a little bit of time after that for people to bring together their final report, which, as I just said earlier, will include that benefits analysis and that economics analysis. So allowing a bit of time at the end to kind of bring together the evidence and data you've built through the project delivery and bringing that together into a final report. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen for a moment, and then I'm going to switch to the Simply Do platform instead, whereby I'll hopefully be able to kind of give you a bit of an overview of what you'll see when you'll go to the site. So hopefully everybody can see that on the screen. So I'll give you a bit of a overview. So when you first log on to the Simply Do system, hopefully you've all had the links to access that. If you haven't, please let us know. We can drop everything in the chat later or pass it on via email. So when you first log on, you'll see these two tabs. So the key thing to note, the first tab that you see on the left, that is where you'll go to access the challenge brief information, to access all the additional documentation, including the contract. It's also where you can access the recording of the previous briefing event in case there's anything you missed within that. The second tab that you'll see, and it's something a bit different that we've put in place for this challenge, is a collaborators marketplace. So this marketplace has been set up to provide kind of a place where you can network. So what it allows you to do is just to submit a brief overview of what your potential idea is, but also for you to set out who you want to be working with. So if you're looking for potential collaborators from certain sectors, certain areas, this gives you the opportunity to just put those details out there on this online portal to say, I'm looking for this person or that person with this skills and knowledge to help fill any gaps that I might have in project delivery. So the key thing to note is that whatever you put there in your idea, anybody who signs into this portal will be able to see that. So please only share on that platform things that you're happy for others to see. So nothing too commercially sensitive. You need to provide enough information that people can understand what it is you're looking to do. But don't provide anything that you would consider to be commercially sensitive. And the other key thing to note is that this is not, if you put your idea on here, this is not your application. You have to go to the first tab and submit your idea through that application process in order to apply for this challenge. So at the moment, this one's showing a slightly earlier closing date because we were trying to avoid any confusion between these two tabs. But based on feedback from the previous briefing event, we are intending to extend the deadline for this networking portal just to allow people a bit more time to confirm who they're collaborating with. So we will be changing the date of the closing date of this particular page. So again, I'm going to take you back to the previous page, and take us to this key tab. So this is the tab that you will need to go to find out all the core information about this challenge. It'll set out the funding details. Just want to highlight on this bit a minute and say important bits to note, because I'll be referring to this later when I'm going through the application bit. So on here, you'll say, how can solutions address the challenges? So solutions could demonstrate the viability, scalability. So you see a number of points within that. So when you're seeking to kind of expand on what benefits you'll be looking to provide to your solution, please make sure you're referring back to these. So kind of like any sort of job interview application, make sure you're considering what those key elements that we're looking for, and make sure that you're demonstrating how you're going to meet those through delivery of your challenge. So please make sure you're familiar with these details as you're submitting your application and bringing that information together. So as I mentioned, you'll see just in the middle of the screen, there's the link there to the previous briefing event if you weren't at that. As I said, in terms of the key details of this challenge, hopefully I've covered some of those already, but we'll go through the main application process. Again, at the bottom, helpful links and documents. So all the kind of background information that you'll hopefully need for this challenge. So on the right hand side at the bottom, you'll see that it says continue idea. Basically, I've started an idea so I can run you through the application process, but you should see that that tab will say start idea, and that's where you will start the application process, which is where I'm going to move us to now. So once you've clicked on start your idea, this is the page that you will see. So hopefully you'll be able to see the difference between that collaborator marketplace and the actual application process. Hopefully that will provide that bit of additional clarity in terms of the separation between those two portals. So this is the application form that you will need to complete in order to submit your application. Hopefully it's not too onerous. We try to make it as clear and succinct as possible. There are word limits, so please note that. And there's quite, there are some significant details to include, so make sure that you are kind of clear and succinct, and also conscious of the fact that not all assessors will be technical experts, so please keep any technical jargon to a limit, just to make sure that what you're putting in your applications is understandable, basically. So I'm going to briefly run through this application form, hopefully give you an opportunity to get a bit more familiar with it and just go through a bit more detail of each question. So at the top is just put in a name for your idea, so something that identifies your particular application. So making sure that it does what it says on the tin. So making sure that you've got an understandable idea name for that. So let's take you on to the main bits of this application. So these first few sections, they won't be scored. These are just kind of the key details, just the kind of overviews of your particular application. So within that project title, please make sure that it's descriptive and make sure that it's relevant to the project. So again, referring back to the challenge brief and making sure that whatever project title you include is relevant to what we're hoping to support in terms of the delivery of these projects. So question 2 within this section, contract duration. So as we said, we're aiming to have 12-month timeline for these projects. So please don't put in any duration that exceeds that. So question 3, looking at total contract costs. As I said earlier, in terms of the budget availability, ideally that would be up to £200,000. In theory, you can put a higher budget ask, but if you do that, you will have to make sure there's significant justification in terms of the value for money and why you're requesting that larger amount. So there are sections which I'll cover later on, which goes into the value for money bit, and we're going to need to see really robust information for why you'd be requesting an amount that is higher. So with this next question, what is the best way to describe your innovation? It does currently say existing technology, but that could be technology or service. So there's just a little drop down list in terms of what best fits. Don't be too concerned if you don't see an option there that really describes your technology or service. Within one of the later sections, you will be able to go into a bit more detail about what is particularly innovative about your solution, and kind of what are some of the key aspects that require that research and development to deliver. So whilst we're looking for a collaborative approach, there will need to be a lead applicant. So the lead applicant will submit their details here. They are the ones who will be named on the SBRI contract. So please make sure that you've got you're situated to be able to sign that contract. So many of these details are relatively self-explanatory. So just organisation names, address, things like that. The VAT registration bit is probably something to note. If you are VAT registered, please include the VAT costs within your budget breakdown. You cannot change your VAT state, you cannot add on VAT later. So say, for instance, as an organisation, you become VAT registered during the duration of the delivery of your project, you can't then add that VAT on at a later date. So if you are VAT registered, make sure you include that at the start. Again, just some basic business information so we can understand what type of business you are, size of business, and what your main business activity is. So on section C, again, it will be the contact details of the lead organisation. So if you are successful in being shortlisted to the meet and greet, it will be these details that we'll be using to contact you. So please make sure that whatever name and contact details you put there are the right person and that they're aware that they may be invited to a meet and greet. So yeah, just basic information that we include for all our applications. So that takes us on to section D, and this is where the real nitty-gritty of the application starts. So this is where we really get into the detail of what your project is. And it's from this point onwards that we begin to use this information to inform the scoring and assessment process. So question 1 asks you to provide a brief Dragon's Den style pitch of your project. So this is your elevator pitch. So this is your opportunity to kind of provide that high level, enticing what is it you're going to do. So please be aware that if you are successful in being funded, it is this description that we will use for any public facing communication. So for example, if there are any press release, or if there's any kind of social media comms, things on our website, it's this description that we will use. So whilst we want it to kind of provide that key context of what it is you're looking to deliver, please avoid providing anything commercially sensitive within that, that you wouldn't want to be public knowledge, because as I said, this bit will be public facing. We do reserve the right to amend that description, but if we do so, we'll keep you consulted about that and let you know of anything that needs changing prior to any publication. So that is only 250 words, so make sure it's succinct, clear, and as I said, avoiding anything commercially sensitive within that. So question 2 is the real key part of it. So this is where you get to describe what it is that you're looking to do, and most importantly, how it will meet the needs of this challenge. And so it says outline the benefits and what areas your solutions are innovative. So again, as I pointed out on the previous page around the brief, make sure you're looking at what some of those outcomes are that we're hoping to achieve by these challenges, and making sure that you're setting out in this section how you think your solution will meet that and how you will deliver those benefits. So when we say what areas or solutions are innovative, as I said, we're not looking for brand new things. And we're looking for things that have been previously explored, so through maybe through some earlier feasibility, that you're already potentially starting to see that there could be benefits in delivery. So we're looking to build upon that. So within this section, you might also want to include previous feasibility work that you've undertaken to get you to this point. So what work have you undertaken to date? And what evidence do you have to support that? So what evidence have you already started to see that potentially whatever service or technology that you're proposing as part of this application, how are you already starting to see and capture those benefits, and how are you going to look to build upon that and test it, and capturing some of the lessons learned that you might have already captured through any earlier work. As I said, please try and avoid using any technical jargon, just in case there's assessors who may be less familiar with those terms. So this section will be scored against how well does your application meet the challenge brief? So have you really captured have you demonstrated that you've understood the context of this challenge? Are the benefits that you're setting out relevant? And will they help us essentially meet the outcomes of this challenge? So it'll also be scored on the level of innovation as well. So we're not, as I said, we're not looking for brand new things, but we're looking for you to demonstrate how this funding, how this R&D contract will help take you forward. So what will this allow you to build upon? What will this allow you to explore and do differently, whether or not that's working, as I said, on a scale and spread level, where you're working with different organizations, different demographics, really. Apologies, for some reason my computer just decided to mute me, so hopefully you didn't miss any of that. But if you did, let me know. Technology really has it against me this morning, so hopefully that'll be the last of the complications. So as I said, that will be assessed against how well do you meet the challenge and how innovative is your solution. So the next section that I'll move on to is section E. And this is looking at readiness and project plan. So we're asking you in the first question to describe your project management process, provide a project plan, and detail the key project milestones. As I've said previously, and I'll say again, because it's really important, we're looking for a collaborative approach. So what we'll be looking for in those deliverables and in those milestones is demonstrating how you're working with potential collaborators, how you're involving end users, and really clearly setting that out in the milestones. So ideally, in terms of the collaborators that you'll be working with, the ideal position is that we'll have named roles and identified actions that that identify how you're working with these collaborators. So not just engaged, as I said earlier, really involved and working with you as part of that development process. Another thing to note in here is to provide an indication of how intellectual property might arise during the project. So in terms of IP and the contract, how it's currently situated is that the IP will rest with the lead applicant. So say you do involve additional collaborators, you may want to consider how between you as organizations you're going to treat that IP. So you may decide that you wish to sign non-disclosure agreements, for example, to ensure everything's confidential throughout, or you may decide to potentially agree certain terms for that intellectual property that you might want to put in place prior to commencing your project. So we don't state, in terms of the challenge owners, we don't state how you will share that IP and operate with your collaborators. That's up for you to decide. But please make sure that you've considered and discussed this upfront. It's something that you don't want to kind of start to get into the delivery of project and then look at later. So please do make sure you're considering that at the beginning. So when we're assessing the applications, we'll be looking at this section to consider, are your milestones clear? Again, are they demonstrating that you've got that real collaborative approach throughout? as I've mentioned earlier, that you're involving end users right from the beginning. You're setting out within your deliverables how you're going to do that. So what we don't want to see is that you involve end users just at the end of the project in your final testing. This has to start right from the beginning to make sure you're really kind of gaining their feedback and really seeing how your solutions will work for them. So taking you on to the second question for this, which says, please explain what challenges you foresee, including any risks and mitigation activities. Key part of this is ensuring the safety of those end users, and whether or not that's a service deliverer or a recipient receiving care, or indeed their relatives and other carers. Safety and making sure that they're only positively impacted is going to be key. So please make sure you consider that within the risks, and you're putting in place actions that will mitigate any risks and ensure those individuals' safety throughout. Another thing that you might want to include within this section, so say you have undertaken feasibility to date and you've come across some key challenges or barriers that you might think have impacted on the success previously. What you may want to include is what lessons you've learned from that and what you might do differently to mitigate some of those previous challenges that you've come across. So, for example, if there have been barriers to implementation, what are you going to do differently through this project to potentially overcome some of those previous issues that you may have experienced? So there's a couple of headings to note in terms of how those risks may be set out. So please make yourself familiar with that and making sure that you're kind of clear on the risks and what actions you're going to put in place. So that again is going to be another key element for scoring. So we're going to be scoring that about how well does this ensure the safety of individuals, but also how well are you identifying and managing those potential risks. Taking you on to question 3, another key question. So please tell us about your delivery team, their relevant expertise, and this includes any qualifications and things like that. And most importantly, the time they will be spending on this project. So again, in terms of this multidisciplinary collaborative approach, we'll be looking at this section to ensure that it demonstrates that. So as I mentioned earlier, ideally named individuals. So if you're working with different collaborators, ideally we'd like to see named individuals, what their role is going to be and how much time they're going to be spending on the project, just to just provide that confidence that you've got the right people in place to develop this project. Question 4, please detail your current state of readiness in order to deliver this project. As you'll have noted within the timescales, the project commencing date is quite soon after the application process. So this section is about providing the confidence that you're in a really good position to start quickly and start effectively. So do you have those right collaborations in place already? Is there any particular equipment or resources that you need to source? If you are, have you kind of outlined how quickly you can do this to avoid any delays right at the start of your project? So again, that will be another question that will be scored throughout the application process. You'll note just below this that there's an opportunity to upload files. So what we're looking for here is for you to provide letters of support for the collaborators that you are going to be working with. So again, it's providing that confidence. You've got these relationships in place, that people are involved and that they are committing to whatever roles have been set out for them, particularly in that project team area, that they're in agreement to do what has been set out in that section. So please do include letters of support. So say you work with a number of different collaborators, please provide a letter of support for each one. This will be a key factor that we will consider. So we are looking for those to be in place. If you do not have those, you may not be successful in being taken forward, because you really need that confidence that you're able to start these projects quickly and that you have those collaborations in place. So this takes me on to section F in terms of the testing. So as I mentioned earlier, at the end of these challenges, we'll be looking for you to provide benefits and economics analysis. So you may want to include in this section how you're going to test that, what sort of evidence and data are you going to capture, how are you going to capture feedback from your end users, and how are you going to utilize that to continue to iterate and develop your solution. Are there any kind of specific technical requirements or assurance standards that you need to consider? Another thing that you may want to consider within this section is whether or not you currently have the right skills and experience to undertake that testing or that validation. So you may want to consider what additional support you might need. For example, do you require additional academic support to do some of that independent evaluation? If you do, please set that out within this, and you may want to include them as a collaborator to help you make sure that you're really collecting that robust information, data and evidence to not only inform the development of your solution, but also to provide that benefits and economics analysis at the end. Again, this is a question that will be assessed to make sure that you're clear on what your testing requirements are and that you're clear on how you will undertake those. Moving quickly on to section G, where we'll be looking at a summary of your project costs and justifications. As I noted really right at the beginning, we're looking for value to demonstrate value for money. So please make sure that you're clear on what your costs are. You provided that clear justification. So for example, who is going to be working on this? How much time are they going to be spending working on this? Again, as I said earlier, if you're VAT registered, please include the VAT. A key thing to notice with SBRI is that it's contracts that provide a fair market value. So, for example, they shouldn't be including profit in those costs. So please make sure that your costs are at fair market value. So again, we'll be looking to see breakdowns of costs that are for potentially the lead applicant, but potentially costs broken down by each collaborator as well, to make sure that you've really got that resource in place to support people's time and commitment in developing and delivering these projects. You also note there's some further detail in terms of indirect and direct costs. I'm not going to go through those now, but please make sure you're familiar with that section and read through some of those details before inputting your costs. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you do put in an amount that is larger than the 200k for each project, then we're really going to be paying particular attention to this section and you're looking at the justification for why you're asking for that larger amount. So please make sure that if you do that, that you're really making it clear, why does this potentially justify a higher amount? What is your reasoning behind that? So another little note at the bottom of that. So we may ask you for itemization or your methods of calculating. So for example, if you put a certain cost against a particular collaborator and all you've got is that figure, we may ask you for some further information for how you calculated that cost. Is it based on a certain number of people for a certain amount of time? Those sort of details we may ask to further assess that value for money aspect within this application. So taking you quickly on to the next bit, which is please provide a payment schedule for your project costs. So this is just kind of setting out what your ideal timeline is for payment. To be clear, when you're setting out this payment schedule, please make sure it's relevant to your milestones and deliverables. So as part of the payment process, you'll be submitting an invoice, but we'll be looking for evidence. And those evidence should relate to your key deliverables. So we'll be looking to see what have you achieved in this time period? How can you evidence that? So please make sure whatever your payment schedule is that is relevant. To be clear, we won't be considering 100% funding of project costs upfront. That's not allowed across any SBRI challenge. So 100% funding upfront won't be considered. So please kind of set out your ideal timeline. It will be open to discussion and we can discuss that should you be successful in proceeding. Question 3. So again, value for money, we're public funded in terms of our challenge, and we've got to make sure that we're continuing to ensure value for money, but also making sure that we're not duplicating our efforts either. So what we ask you to do here is to just detail any funding you've received previously or currently receiving in relation to the particular solution or service that you are delivering. So just to be clear, If you have received or currently receiving funding in relation to what you're developing, this doesn't exclude you from applying. But what we want to be clear is, what are you currently being funded to deliver? And how does that differ from this application? So we're looking for real clear detail in separation between these deliverables. What will this challenge and this funding opportunity allow you to do that you're not currently doing through what you've already been funded or currently being funded to do? An additional note on this one, we do have assessors from a range of different backgrounds. So potentially we do have assessors from other funding bodies. So it could be picked up as part of that assessment process. So please do be as open and honest as possible, and including that funding at this point right up front and making it clear what the separation is, so that we're not kind of having to go back and discuss that at a later date. So it's all considered and we're aware of it right at the start of the assessment process. As I said, it doesn't exclude you. We just want to be confident that we avoid any duplication of funding and any duplication of deliverables. So taking you on to question H, which is around commercialisation. So when we're thinking not-for-profit commercialisation, may not seem like the best word for you in this context, but we're looking for, how will you make this solution, whether or not it's a service technology, how will you make it a reality? How will you bring it to the market and make sure that it is a service that can be implemented? So we'll be looking for you to consider who you might need to work with to make that a reality, and potentially what additional funding streams you may need to help support that. So just to be clear, this is a one-off funding opportunity. We're potentially not at this point looking to deliver subsequent rounds of this particular challenge. It is a one-off, and there are no guarantees about funding for implementation. Whilst we'd love to say we'd be able to kind of fund that buying things at the end, that's not something that SBRI supports. So you're really going to need to consider what additional funding streams, what additional business support you may need to access in order to bring your solution or service to reality. So we do note that you might not have all of these answers at this point. So these might be things that you'll be looking to develop the evidence and kind of knowledge around whilst you're delivering your project through this challenge. But what we're looking for is a confidence that you're already considering this, that you're already putting in place plans for who you need to contact, what support you may need, and starting to look at what additional funding streams may be required to support this. And in particular, in terms of, who will you need to work with, who's potentially might buy this at the end, although noting, affordability for the end user is key. So ideally free at the point of use to make sure that things are accessible, but if they're not free at the point of use, how are you going to make that fair, accessible and affordable? So some details we'll be looking for you to include in that section. And as I said, these will be things that will be scored. So second question is, please detail timescales. The problems set out within this challenge, they're ones we're facing today. And so we need solutions as rapidly as possible. So we'll just be looking for you to provide a kind of overview of how quickly, say you were successful in demonstrating the benefits of your solutions, how quickly at the end of this challenge might you be able to roll out either that service or that technology, and potentially how quickly can you scale up? So how quickly can we start to be delivering these solutions across Wales to deliver those wider impacts? So the third question, again, is on value for money to the public and third sector organisations. And this includes any potential favourable terms. So how are you going to make sure that it's affordable for public sector or third sector organisations in Wales? Are you going to have any favourable terms for potential collaborators that you've worked with who've helped you develop this solution? So in terms of potential leases, contracts, things like that, are you going to offer them potential discounts because of the work that they've done in helping you to develop these solutions? So these are things you might want to consider in this section. That value for money, the sustainability and affordability of any solution, service or technology is going to be key aspects of this challenge. So that actually takes us to the end of the application process. So hopefully that'll give you a bit of an understanding of what the questions are, what they mean, and also how we'll assess those as well. Just the last section at the end is just a quick declaration. So the lead applicant signs this, but please make sure if you're signing this as the lead applicant on behalf of other collaborators, that you have confirmed and that they are in agreement with what this application contains before you sign that declaration at the end. And then you'll see at the bottom the green submit button. Please press that before the 20th of October to make sure that you do submit your challenge. The one thing to note, that with the Simply Do platform, once you start filling in this application, it automatically saves. So you can dip in, you can dip out, it automatically saves that for you. And as I said, on the left-hand side, there's a little add collaborator button. So once you start this application as the lead applicant, you can then invite others to participate and start to fill in some of those details. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and open up to the room for questions. I think that's hopefully covered in more detail the application process and hopefully given you a bit more confidence in how you can do that. But now I'll open up to the room for any questions you may have. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat, or if you want to put your hand up, please do so. And then fabulous. I think Aziz, I think you were first. If you'd like to go first, then please.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So I was just switching on my camera and on my mic, and I didn't want to
No problem.
the fatal flaw of my. Can you hear me now?
I can. And don't worry about any technical issues. You can't surpass what we base this on.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was really great. I just caught the end of your session there, so forgive me if you've already answered this. We're looking at a bespoke training solution for health and social care. We do a lot of work around healthcare currently in clinical skills training. And so the question is training the current workforce and future workforce a priority area and something that could be relevant in this call?
Yes, certainly it fits within the scope. So it's possibly sits more under that second theme in terms of the supporting the foundations of domiciliary care. But obviously retention and recruitment of staff is a key challenge. So just in terms of, we're going to be looking for, what are you going to be doing differently? So if you have a current model of training, how is this going to develop that further, and who you're going to work with to test that? So what elements of this going to be innovative? It sounds like it could potentially be quite a succinct element of the challenge, so potentially you've got to think about the scale and think of that in terms of the budget that you might want to set aside, consider applying for. So in terms of wider, broader impacts of the overall domiciliary care, we're probably, it's not going to rock the world. I don't mean to be rude in saying that, it's not going to change domiciliary care fundamentally. It's going to be looking at supporting things. So it may not, it may score slightly lower in terms of that. Does it meet the need of the challenge, because it's such a defined area? But as I said, it's one of those kind of supporting areas. So yeah, please feel free to kind of submit an idea application around that. But as I said, make sure you're clear on what is going to be different, what you're going to be looking at beyond what your current service delivery is. So hopefully that answers that question for you.
Yeah, that's great. If I could just, add to that, would it be different, or viewed differently, if it was around patient education? So educating family members of patients in their homes rather than staff education?
Again, I suppose we're looking at impact. So if it's looked at both, that will probably, whole systems approach is very important. Are you supporting a system that looks at both sides of the problem? So potentially, if you were looking at it from that angle, it would probably have more potential for impact, if that makes sense. So those might be some of the things you might want to consider, because again, when we're looking at how well does this meet the challenge, that potential for impact is going to be a key part of that scoring criteria. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to, I think that, Chris, I did see your hand up as second, but at the moment you might have taken your hand down, so I'm going to move to Mel. Chris, if you do want to jump back in, please just put your hand up again, and then we can go to you after Mel has had a chance to ask her question. Mel, if I can go to you, please.
Hiya, Kate. I was going to write it in the chat, but the chat is turned off. I know with lots of digital problems this morning.
Oh, yeah, I'm cursed today. Absolutely cursed.
I actually went to the loo when you were saying question 3, and I just wondered whether you could go back to that. I do apologise.
Of course, no problem. Do you know which section that was under? So
it was under, we'd gone for E, yeah, demonstrate how you work
section
with, and then
E.
it was 1, 2, 3 and
Yeah. 3 and 4. No worries. What I'll do is I'll quickly pop it back on the screen as well, just so you can kind of see which bits and also confirm that this is the bit that you were talking about. So hopefully that's back up on the screen for you. So this is section E, where we're looking at readiness and project plan, question 3. So this is telling us about your delivery team, relevant expertise, and the time that they will be spending on the project. So as I've said previously, we're looking for collaborative projects, multidisciplinary approach. So we're going to be looking at broad representation across your delivery team. As I said earlier, ideally, if you're working with collaborators, ideally we'd like to see named individuals. So if you've got an organisation that you're working with, ideally we'd like to see named individuals as part of that, what their role's going to be, and also what time they're going to be spending on the project. So it's just making sure that you've got the right people, the relevant skills involved throughout the project, and that they're suitably qualified and experienced to do that. If you're working with collaborators, subcontractors, you might want to consider what additional skills and experience they're bringing to this project to help you deliver. I don't know if you heard question 4 as well. Should I go through that one quickly as well?
Yes, please, if you would. Yeah,
not a problem at all.
Thank you. It's really helpful.
So please detail your current state of readiness in order to deliver this project within the dates outlined in the challenge brief. As I said, the timelines on this are quite rapid. So the start date is in November. So we're looking things to kick off quite quickly. So what we'd like to see in this section is for you to provide us with the confidence that, say you were successful in being awarded a contract, that you're ready to start quickly. That potentially you've got those collaborations and those relationships in place in order for you to start actual delivery upon that commencement date. You might want to consider any equipment or resources that might be required to support your project. So if there's things you've got to buy or source, what are your sort of timescales around that? Are they going to cause any potential delays to your contract? Another thing I suppose that we sometimes see within that section is if people need to recruit for roles. Obviously that can be quite a big delay, in terms of recruiting people to certain roles. So if that is the case, I suppose it's setting out that you'll be able to do that in line with your deliverables. So can you bring them on for the bit that they're needed, if that makes sense? So overall, even if you've still got to source these things, providing the confidence that that's not going to impact on the overall delivery of your project and meeting the overall timescale. So just a bit more information around some of the things you might want to consider within that. But yeah, it's basically about, if you are awarded the contract, can you start quickly? And when we say start, can you actually start the work, not start building your relationships and starting your engagement at that point? So that's why we're looking for you to have collaborators from the start, so that you're in a really good position to begin working together straight away, basically, if you are awarded. Does that help? Is there anything else you wanted me to cover on that?
Really helpful. Thank you,
anything
Kate.
else you missed, or
No,
feel free to drop me a message afterwards if there's anything you have missed and you want me to go through in a bit more detail, because I'd be happy to do that.
Lovely. All right then. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to go back to that screen and stop sharing for a moment. I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment. I think Chris may have left. Hopefully he didn't get kicked out. And again, apologies to everybody for the the very late start and for all the problems of technology that we experienced today. I was jinxed by the first event going smoothly, so the second one was a bit of a disaster. John, if I can move to you, please.
Yeah, just a point of clarity, really. The costs, as stated in the document, are they inclusive of VAT or exclusive of VAT?
If, as an organisation, you are VAT registered, please include VAT as part of those costs. So the 200k is inclusive of VAT.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And just to note, it can't be added on later. So say during the financial year and during the delivery of the project, you do then become VAT registered. You can't add it on afterwards, unfortunately. So please make sure you consider that, consider will the value of the contract then kind of take you over the limit of when you can't be VAT registered. So just something else to consider. So thank you, John. Any other questions? As I said, if anybody does have anything they want to follow up on later, please feel free to drop us an email via SBRI Centre of Excellence email. It's probably worth me sticking that in the chat as well, just so that everybody's got it there ready and knows how best to contact us. I'll just get that up for you. Give me one moment. And that hopefully give you a little bit more time as well to consider whether or not you have any further questions just before I drop this in, which means I have to then turn on the chat, which is not allowing me to do afterwards. Anyway, on the SBRI, on the Simply Do portal, all our contact details in terms of our email address and everything are on there. As I said, it's covered in the previous briefing event, but if you have any issues with the Simply Do platform, I'll quickly, very, very, very quickly go back to that screen again. So if there's something with the platform, something technical that you're having issues with, you'll see a little chat box at the bottom. Please go to that and you'll be able to contact Simply Do directly, who will be able to help you on the technical side. So if it is any technical issues, please contact them through that. So I think that's about everything from my side. I'm not seeing any more questions. As I said, if you do have anything, please feel free to contact us later. And again, sincere apologies that everything has not run quite as smoothly as I would have hoped this morning. But I wish you all the best of luck with your applications. We are really keen to see third sector not-for-profit organisations participating in this challenge, whether or not as a lead applicant or a collaborator. So please do engage. Please put your details on the collaborator marketplace if you're looking to work with others. So whether or not you've already got an idea or you're willing to be part of a potential project, please dip into that and just kind of put yourself out there and hopefully connect with others. So we see some great solutions coming forward. Thank you again for your time. And as I said, any further questions, if anybody wants to kind of drop us a message or anything afterwards, please do let us know. Thank you again.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks
Thanks
very
all.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye.